employers are not only looking at the hard skills, right? So, types of technology we've used, or do we understand accounting principles, or do I know how to use a piece of equipment, right? Those are the hard skills. But the soft skills, I would say, are even more important because we need to develop that early on, and it's going to continue to get even more important. So that's communication, conflict management, time management, understanding to develop a routine at work. And so again, when I say for younger kids and for parents who are listening, have your kid plan 1 or 2 meals a week at home, because again, in planning a meal, to say, hey family, I'm gonna make dinner on Friday. It's gonna be tacos, right? There's communication. Two, working to say, hey, I've got to go get groceries, and talking with mom, dad, or a guardian and say, here's what we need to order for groceries or go pick up. And then planning out the meal, because if you cook one thing too early in the evening, it may not be fresh for actual dinner. So again, we can start developing these skills early on. That's one thing I talk a lot with parents is to say, hey, what are some of the things the kids can be doing at home that develop these skills that become really important in the workplace?
Sara Colorosa, you provide coaching and mentoring services to help individuals of all ages and abilities identify their strengths and talents, navigate life exploration and work readiness, and shift them towards greater independence. You work with parents, guardians, employers, and organizations, and you have a special focus on autism spectrum disorder, right?
I do. That's correct.
Okay, great. And you have a doctorate in education and human resource studies, and your company, the Engagement Catalyst,
Mhm.
is based in Fort Collins, Colorado. But you work with clients all over the country, isn't that true?
I do. Yes.
Okay. Well, again, really excited to get into some of the specific tips and strategies and skills and experience that you work with your clients to develop in order to make
Mhm.
them work ready. But I thought just to get things started, if you could share a little bit about the kinds of clients generally that you work with.
Mhm.
I'm sure some of them find you on their own and
Yeah.
others are, maybe referred to you through some of the organizations that you work with. So maybe you can just tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me here. Most of my clients, I work with, as you mentioned, those young adults. So late high school on up. I've had individuals who are 30, 40, 50, and even 60 years old working with me. It's not a requirement to be neurodiverse or have autism to work with me. It's just a specialization that I have because I'm really able to meet people where they're at. And so I just, because of my schooling and my previous experiences, being able to work with this awesome community that we get to support has been just a niche of mine that I've been able to help fill. Most of my clients find me through referrals. Just as you mentioned, we have a really cool supporter community and providers. And so as we get to know different therapists or other coaches throughout the Colorado area, um, they start to refer out to me or vice versa. Sometimes I'm referring out to them, and sometimes even clients that I've been working with may tell somebody in their neighborhood or somebody they might be going to school with about me. And so it's just, I mean, I do some advertising. I'm in the Psychology Today um, online, where families can go look for providers. I've been part of different autism groups and such, but really it's mostly through providers that work with folks. And as we continue to build those support teams, that's how we all get connected.
That's fantastic. I imagine there's a huge need for what you do.
Mhm.
And one of the next questions I wanted to ask you was in terms of work readiness, how does that conversation go generally? I mean, obviously
Yeah,
every client is coming from a different starting point with different
sure.
goals, but how does that unfold when you first start working with a client?
Right. So, like I said, I meet people where they're at. So, if they're coming to me and they're really eager to get a job, we do a lot of work around identifying their skills, talents, experiences, to start to create a giant puzzle in my mind where I can help put those pieces together. So they may have a particular interest that they want to pursue for a job. But yet, as we start to do that exploration, maybe it's more of a hobby versus a job or a career path. I also really want people to be set up for success. And so I've had a number of clients come to me and say, I just want a job. And I try to make it really clear that I'm not a recruiter. So I just don't go out and look like some other job coaches might and just place somebody in an organization. That really we need to do some exploration, but also what are those skill sets, the executive function skill sets, where is that person when they come to me? And so sometimes we really might do some talking about what kinds of routines or time management techniques do they currently use at home or in school or even in a current job. And, sometimes my clients aren't necessarily work ready because they don't have that foundation. And as I've mentioned before and continue to say, I don't wanna put a client in a work, setting if they're not going to be successful. So sometimes when people come to me and say, "I just want a job," they may not necessarily be ready for it. So we kinda have to almost work backwards a little bit to get those skills in place so that when they go into, a job and they're working and a supervisor comes over to them and says, "Hey, how is this project going?" or "What's the status?" Our clients are able to have that conversation, or even better, they might be proactive and address that with their supervisor before even getting asked.
That all makes sense.
Mhm.
How dialed in are many of your clients in terms of specifically what kind of job or career they're moving towards? Do you find that it's
Mm,
more of an open-ended, I just feel like I need to be working, or are there specific industries or careers
mhm.
that they're looking at, or is it just kind of all over the place?
Yeah, again, I think it's all over the place because of where the clients are when they come to me. So one distinction I start off is identifying, does somebody want a job or are we truly looking at the career track? So sometimes a job or a job is what I call it too when I'm working with clients is they just want some money, right? Maybe they're trying to build that resume, they want to get some money, help pay for bills, those kinds of things, but it's not necessarily where they see themselves long term. Other folks are coming in and maybe they finish school or some certifications and they're ready for a career track. And so we really look at that career pathing. So, where are we currently and where do we want to go? And again, that puzzle I was talking about also really helps us paint a picture because we can start to identify what industries that passion may be in. And then we can also identify companies that these folks might want to work with as well. So we do a lot of research and putting the various pieces together. So yeah, sometimes clients will come to me and they know they want to be in the tech industry or they want to work outside doing more natural resource type work and activities. But sometimes even sometimes we all do this, it doesn't matter if we're neurodiverse or not, what we think something might be isn't necessarily what it is. And so, when folks come and want to hurry up and get a job, again, I think we have to step back a little bit and do some more work to see if what our wants are align with what's actually out in the field.
So I have a two-part question that is a direct follow-up to that. So when you're
Mhm,
working with clients, what do you look at to assess where those skills, academic strengths are, cognitive strengths, even
mhm,
temperament and personality?
mhm,
How do you assess that with them? And then what kind of specific research or experiences do you help them in obtaining to find out whether that job or career path is a good fit? I know
mhm,
we talked about how maybe some volunteer opportunities might be helpful, but Yeah, how does that work on both sides?
Yeah, so I think part of it is that pre-work, that foundational work I was talking about, is sometimes we have to kind of get to know ourselves better. And so sometimes I'll have my clients really talk and think about. I give them all homework when they leave a session with me, and I'll say, I want you to think about how much time do you focus on a particular subject area? Or what kind of work environment do you want to be in? And I give them some ideas, right? Like, do you want to be in a call center environment where there's a lot of chatting? Or an environment that is a bullpen, right? Which is where there might be a lot of cubicles, so everybody has their own workstation, but maybe there's a lot of talk, and you might overhear people's phone calls or even them pounding away on a keyboard. So really kind of thinking through different types of work environments. A lot of my clients too, they may say they like to work with their hands and do labor type work. So I'll say, well, cool. What if we got you into like landscaping and working with those kinds of crews? But when they get to thinking about it, working outdoors can be really difficult for some of our clients because of the swings in temperature. And so again, we have to look at what does our client really want to do, and then those environmental factors. So again, I ask a lot of questions, and then I have my clients do a lot of reflecting as well, just journaling. What do they like? What don't they like? Then we take that information, and I use a couple of sources. One, when we start looking at individual job descriptions and job postings out on, the various big boards, Indeed, LinkedIn Jobs, Glassdoor. In reading the job description, you can get a lot of information about what am I going to be doing if this was my job. Plus, a lot of job descriptions list what we call conditions of employment. And so that may talk a little bit about those environmental factors that a client really has to consider. We also do a lot of research on the company themselves. So going out to the individual websites and kind of seeing what projects are they working on, you can start to glean what is company culture like to see if it aligns with what our clients are wanting. Another source I use a lot is called ONET. ONET is actually from the Department of Labor. It takes all of the jobs that are posted and starts to develop a long list of different careers that are out across the country, because it's actually developed and maintained by the Department of Labor. So it's a really high level look at what jobs are. And within ONET, they talk a lot about the things you were asking about around what kinds of tasks may I be asked to do in a particular field or industry? Or how often is travel required? So, again, doing a lot of that legwork helps us understand a little bit more about what to expect from a job. And as I tell all of my clients, instead of saying no right away to something because it doesn't look perfect, and I don't know any job that's perfect or 100%, but we want to get as close as we can. Some of it we will also have to learn about when we go through the interview process. So we are also crafting questions to ask of the hiring manager or the interview team to find out more about, does this job really align with what we want at the end of the day?
Those are such great tips and
Mm.
specific strategies. Do you find that I wouldn't imagine that a lot of entry level job seekers have had this kind of
Mhm.
training or even these sorts of thoughts in terms of trying to figure out how to glean information about what companies
Yeah.
are doing, corporate culture. That I don't recall being learning any of
No,
that when I was in school.
no, me either. And I think that's what's been a passion of mine, right? I've spent over 20 years in the human resource field. And so I've learned a lot about what's going on from the organization's side. They put a lot of time and energy into developing a particular position. And so, again, knowing that, I can share that information with clients to say, hey, you know, we should also be doing our work too to see if it's a good match. I know a lot of schools, here in Fort Collins, the schools, they do have those programs. Sometimes they're more elective type programs for students to get involved in the career search. So I do like to have the opportunity to work with folks as early as we can because it's never too late, right? Waiting one more day, is one more day. But if I can work with parents, especially of those younger kiddos, we can start having that conversation maybe in a little more indirect way. And then when those youngsters start to turn 15, 16, 17, then it's a good time for them to be in my office and start having those conversations, because really the stuff you and I have already talked about is one part of it, but also how do we start to align our academics to where we want to be. So if I know I want to end up in a particular field, let's say I want to go into IT, and maybe I'm 16 years old, what classes can I be taking in high school? And then if I'm thinking about post-secondary education, whether it's certifications or a college environment, well, where do I want to go that's going to help set me up for success to be in IT? So again, we kind of look to the future, which can be feel kind of intimidating for some of our neurodiverse friends, but knowing that it's not we're not getting super specific, but we need to start kind of funneling in or narrowing down where we want to be, so we make some really intentional decisions along the way.
Sure. So you're not just identifying jobs that current academic skills would support, but also looking long term and really building towards where those desires are and what may be possible in the future.
Correct. The one caveat I would add is sometimes working with our neurodiverse friends, right? We sometimes hyper focus on a particular thing. So if I say, hey, I'm going to go into IT, but maybe my interests change, or maybe I find out the schooling isn't really something I want to do, everything we do when it comes to career, there's decisions that can be made. I call those forks in the road. And so, like I mentioned earlier, I might read on a job description that this is something that is really interesting to me, but maybe I start to feel overwhelmed because of the particular work environment. And I encourage clients, instead of saying no and pushing that away, I say, hey, let's apply, because that's the only step we're worried about right now. And if we do have those concerns, let's write them down and we're going to figure out how to get that resolved. So even though there's very little in life we can't change, and especially when it comes to jobs and career, we can change, but we need to make sure that we're doing our work, right? The groundwork to make really good informed decisions.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Certainly obstacles are going to come up. That's just part of
Yep.
life. So navigating that's part of
Yep.
the process and the
Yep.
skills. In addition to academic skills or degrees, how do you or what recommendations do you have for especially I guess the younger
Mhm.
um late teens, early adults in terms of getting the kinds of experience, life experience that employers are looking for?
Right. That's a great question. I get that all the time. And I say every experience we have is something we can put on a resume. I have books of just samples to show clients, and there are as many different ways to format and organize a resume that everything doesn't have to just go under professional experience as a heading. So, we can mess around with different ways to word things on a resume and still be very honest and transparent about what we've done. So, even helping out in a neighborhood, right? And helping out maybe a neighbor in with childcare, or helping them with lawn, mowing their lawn, whether they're getting paid or not, it doesn't matter for our clients. It's still experience, because whether I want to go into lawn care and landscaping as a career, but those transferable skills really start to matter. So we start to discuss like, well, how often did you go mow the lawn, and how did you know you needed to go mow the lawn? And so again, it comes down to the organizing and time management and communication skills that can go on a resume. So even just purely just offering to help in our neighborhood can be so beneficial. Also, I encourage folks to go volunteer, right? And so again, it's just a great way to get involved, to develop our skills. And it doesn't, again, have to be in the field a client wants to go into, but it could just be, hey, I want to get some additional experience. This is where jobs also come into play, because a career, it's not hard, but it can be harder to get out of. But if I go and try something on like a hat, and maybe I take an internship or an apprentice, or even like you said, more of those entry level positions as a job, it gives me the opportunity and our clients an opportunity to see, is this really what they want to pursue? Especially if they're considering further education or certifications, or is this really what I want to do for a number of years? So it's like trying on hats. And I say, get different experiences to see, does it really match what we think it should? And it's everything is a resume builder.
So for volunteer activities or joining clubs or participating in an activities, those maybe not traditional work focused um, endeavors,
Mhm,
for younger listeners,
mhm,
what kinds of skills does somebody
mhm.
develop doing that kind of stuff? And why does that matter to an employer?
Yeah, that's a great question. Employers are not only looking at the hard skills, right? So, types of technology we've used, or do we understand accounting principles, or do I know how to use a piece of equipment, right? Those are the hard skills. But the soft skills, I would say, are even more important because we need to develop that early on, and it's going to continue to get even more important. So that's communication, conflict management, time management, understanding to develop a routine at work. And so again, when I say for younger kids and for parents who are listening, have your kid plan 1 or 2 meals a week at home, because again, in planning a meal, to say, hey family, I'm gonna make dinner on Friday. It's gonna be tacos, right? There's communication. Two, working to say, hey, I've got to go get groceries, and talking with mom, dad, or a guardian and say, here's what we need to order for groceries or go pick up. And then planning out the meal, because if you cook one thing too early in the evening, it may not be fresh for actual dinner. So again, we can start developing these skills early on. That's one thing I talk a lot with parents is to say, hey, what are some of the things the kids can be doing at home that develop these skills that become really important in the workplace?
Sure. Yeah, I'm thinking any kind of goal setting,
Yeah.
goal accomplishment, and all the executive functioning skills that I know you work with clients on,
Mhm.
whether it's starting small or going a little bit bigger. Yeah, something as simple as fixing a meal. There's a lot of steps and
Right.
planning components to doing that and staying motivated through it and staying focused and accomplishing it and wrapping it up and all those things. That all makes sense.
Exactly.
Meal preparation at home. What else for younger kids
Yeah.
in the home, particularly? What can they start doing now? Because I hear sometimes with the younger kids we work with, well, maybe I'm too young to have a job. Okay,
Mhm,
fair
mhm.
enough. But
Right.
what are some things that they can start doing early on, just at home, besides just meal prep?
Yeah. So, even like our little kids, right? They can help remove dishes or set the table for meals. And put dishes in the dishwasher. Also helping with laundry, I think is another good one because having the discussion with little kids about, okay, how many pairs of socks do you have? And then working backwards to say, if I only have 10 pairs of socks, when do we need to do laundry by? And then you pick a laundry day. So again, I think really anything and everything around the house could be made age appropriate. Even, hey, who's going to go out and pick up the paper in the morning or go grab the mail? And where does it have to go? Is there a key to the mailbox? So having that responsibility of not only the task, but maybe the parts of the task as well.
Sure. Or even awareness, I guess, that the
Yeah,
task needs to be completed.
right.
Certainly having been an employee and an employer, yeah, it's just noticing what needs to be done and kind of
Yeah,
taking care of those things
yeah.
proactively.
Right, and I talk to families a lot about that and even my individual clients to say, when you finish a task, whether you're at home or at work, what do you do? What comes next? And so we have those discussions because it's not a matter of, well, I'm done, so I might hop on my phone or start watching something on YouTube, but it's a matter of, yeah, you get to go ask, hey, so I finished this up. What is next? And those are the skills. It doesn't matter if it's a parent, if it's a roommate, or your boss, it's the same kind of conversation.
Sure. Last time we spoke, you were sharing a little bit of or a story with me about kind of a case study that you had
Mhm.
regarding a client you've worked with in the past. And
Yeah,
as you're describing all this, that's all coming back to me now. Can you just share for
yeah.
listeners kind of how that went, just so they get an idea of how all this matters?
Right. So, I had a client who came to me, was really eager to get a job. And I first started to dive in around why they were coming to me. And yes, they wanted to earn money, but we really started to look at kind of what was the long-term strategy here. And so we looked at what they really found interesting in high school and to say, okay, well, how do we align this with your current college experience, and are we taking the right classes? Now, granted, at college, some of our students have to take the core classes and get those out of the way, but we all get to take electives. And so we made good strategies to align with what those college classes electives could be and should be to start again getting that experience to see, is this something that, you know, my client really wanted to do a little bit longer term? Then we also started again using some of those outlets I shared with you earlier, Indeed and ONET. When my client knew what field they wanted to go into, we started doing that really future looking to see, hey, is this what I think it really is? And we started to make some adjustments because they thought a particular industry, and we're talking not even an individual job, but an industry was a little bit different than what they thought. So we started to really think about maybe some internships or even clubs and organizations they could get involved with at their college to even get a better hands-on experience to see, is this the kind of work I want to be doing? Or am I even just kind of going maybe down the wrong path, even academically? So, again, getting involvement helps us, again, try on some hats. And they also were still building their resume. I also did a lot of work with this individual client too to find out what was their home routine look like, and they were pretty, you know, they were pretty open and said, "I go to school and then I don't really do anything after that, right? I kinda hole up in my room, I play my video games." And so we actually started to develop a routine for them around what time to wake up in the morning, different tasks that they needed to accomplish for themselves, but also identifying things that were being done in their home/community/work environment that they could also start being more responsible for. So we created things like calendars. My client particularly liked using electronic calendars and not paper. So we developed we put it on their phone of the things they were going to be responsible for. And then we really talked about too, how do they share with their family that they were now going to be responsible for those things? So again, creating those expectations within the home. And as we know, life doesn't always go to plan. So, we had some shakeups, right? Where they said they were going to do something and then it didn't really happen. So then how do we start to go through that conflict when their parents said, "Hey, I thought you said you were going to mow the lawn this week and you didn't. And so saying, "Yep, I didn't, but here's when I am going to get it done." So again, reestablishing those expectations. And so again, we created some really good tools for not only how to, have those executive function skills, but again, it also allowed my client to see that they had more control of their schedule. And I tell people a lot of times, use your home environment kind of like the workplace. Maybe mom and dad could be your boss. And so how would you communicate with them? And so now this client's doing really well. We have a much better idea of college classes they need to take, and they're well on their way to landing the career that they want.
How does that experience change them? How do they
Yeah.
feel differently as they go through this and experience these skill growths and these achievements and even failures, I guess?
Yeah, yeah. I think one, I tell people all the time, I think we learn more through failure than we do from things that work. And that's a big mind shift for our clients, especially some of those folks who might be a little more black and white thinking. And so as we start to develop that muscle of like, hey, not everything is negative when it doesn't work. It just means it doesn't work and we move on and find something else. It's also so fun and powerful to watch clients as they start to see things that work for them. And so, as long as they, as I say, get curious with me, right? Let's ask some questions, let's try some stuff. Even if we've tried something before in our lives and it didn't work, let's try it again because, as we grow and experience more things, something might work now when it didn't work before. And so, it's really fun to watch this growth happen and for clients to really regain that power and control because that all leads to self advocacy when they end up in the workplace or really in any type of environment.
That sounds really empowering. Sure.
Yeah,
To be able to have that responsibility and the confidence that they can take care of these things
yeah.
and feel good about that. Um, I was going to ask you, is there one particular kind of impediment, I guess, or what is the biggest impediment
Mm,
to being work ready? I mean, again, I know you work with a lot of different clients, but do you generally find, is it more the skills and abilities?
mm,
Is it a certain attitude? Is it
mm.
motivation? Is it executive functioning like initiation? Is it accountability, upbringing? Are there any
Yeah.
themes that you see kind of rise to the
Mhm.
forefront or come to the forefront with clients? Or is it just sort of, it just depends on everybody's unique situation?
Yeah, I think everything you mentioned, Andrew, has been brought to me. I think especially when we're talking about our folks with neurodiversity, a lot of times it has felt like a struggle, right? When they're navigating school systems and trying to learn and understand their own selves, their learning style, their communication style that can be really hard. And so sometimes folks, when they come to me, they just feel really defeated. And so when we start talking about work, it's yet another system that they feel like they have to kind of might feel like an uphill climb. And so I think if we really start focusing on what amazing talents and skills our folks have, it may not feel so tough. I mean, I do have conversations about what accommodations might look like in the workplace, but I can honestly say most of the time, it's not about accommodations, it's about conversation. And so, how do we have those conversations with our supervisors or coworkers about the styles of things we have and so that can be a bit of a mind shift for clients because, all throughout their schooling, it was about getting the right supports in place. And supports just might look a little bit different when we're actually in work. And so if I know I like to have a quiet environment to do my work and focus, it's not about seeking an accommodation right away. It might be going to my manager and saying, "Hey, is it okay that I wear headphones? And if you need to reach me, you can text me because I'll have my phone next to me. or you can send a message through like Teams or something like that, those instant message communications. And that way I can still focus, but yet people can still reach me. And so I think all of these things that you mentioned are true. And it's also kind of knowing how to have those conversations when we get to work.
How do employers respond to the different approach between accommodations and conversations? Do you get feedback about that?
Yeah, so, honestly, because sometimes when an employee asks for accommodations, it kind of starts this big process, right? You have to get various people involved and all of those things, versus if I just go to my supervisor and say, "Hey, is it okay if I wear some headphones to focus?" Most of the time, it's gonna be kind of a non-issue. And so, again, I say, let's deal with something at the least common denominator. And most supervisors aren't going to care if you wear headphones at work, as long as you can be, if they can get a hold of you. And so I think it's not that they know anything different, right? Because a supervisor might say, "Hey, that's cool that you want to focus. Like, how can we help support you?" It's kind of a non-issue at that point versus when we start talking about accommodations, and there are definitely times and places for accommodations, but I think it just doesn't create such this kind of chaotic feel for everybody involved through that, accommodative process.
Kinda depends how you word it, so maybe it's a little
Yeah.
bit less conflictual or a little bit it seems like a really wise approach.
Yeah.
Um, uh, in addition to the skills and the experiences and some of the knowledge that you've talked about, are there any other, and I guess again, I'm thinking about some of the younger listeners here, are there any other characteristics or traits that you hear from employers that they're really looking for in particular when they look at applications?
Right. And it's not necessarily just through the application, but it's through the whole hiring process. I think that that ability to problem solve is huge. So again, for our younger folks, hey, if I'm met with a problem, how can I come up with solutions versus just running to mom, dad, a family member who might be seen as the person in charge. And I think this is where families too, if your kiddo does something and makes a decision, maybe it's not right, but how can we help encourage them to do that more often, without saying, "Hey, you made the wrong decision?" So I think coming up with real problem solution situations is good. I think also having some responsibility and accountability at home, right? Those, whether it's at home or it's at school or in the workplace, if I say I'm going to do something, I need to be able to do it. So even for our younger listeners, like, hey, make sure that your desk is cleaned up, at the end of a day, or if you get a project out and are working on it in the kitchen, make sure it's put away by the time we have dinner. And if it doesn't happen, then what does that mean? That consequence piece. And that consequence doesn't always have to be negative either. So I think this is a place for families to get creative around, what things can be done. And then, how do we kind of hold each other accountable? And I think kids can do this too with their families. If mom, dad, or my family, aunt or uncle come to me and we say, "Hey, we're going to do something," and it doesn't happen, and it wasn't shared with me early enough so I could make a change, then that kiddo should be able to say, like, "Hey, you said you were going to do this, right? So now what?" I think the other big thing for some of our neurodiverse friends is, hyper focus or focusing, even in general, or change. And so, anytime we can help our younger kids start to understand change is probably one of the only constants and guarantees in life, but it can become very difficult as we get older, to undergo change. So if we say tonight we're gonna have pizza and all of a sudden we're like, "Nope, we're gonna have hamburgers instead," how do we, get through that change? Because some of our younger folks may not like that at all. Like, I was said we were gonna have pizza and now we're not, so We might have a tantrum or those kinds of things, but no, hey, if we're not going to have pizza tonight, maybe we're going to have pizza or we're going to have pizza in 3 days from now.
Practicing some flexibility.
Yep. And then on the hyper focus part too, right, is how do we create breaks in our day? So if I'm really focused on something, finding techniques such as alarms, our computer systems are so smart now these days. If I'm super hyper focused on a video, telling my computer after 20 minutes it gets to go to sleep, right? And so again, to draw our attention away from the things that are causing us to hyper focus. Again, a lot of clients will tell me alarms they just kind of ignore. So we have to get creative and maybe find different apps or different pieces of technology that can help us. But I think, again, that's something at an early age we can start with. If a kid really likes to play with a particular toy, have the discussion. Hey, you're going to play with this for 20 minutes. Then what are you going to do? And having a plan of what comes next is as important as the actual task itself.
These really are life skills, aren't they?
Yep, they are.
You've been doing this for a long time. We're recording this in late September 2024. What is the job market like from your perspective for some of these young job seekers?
Yeah. This is where I don't like to get negative. I hope you all can see that, but it is challenging right now. It's, like I mentioned earlier, I've been in human resources for a long time. And when I talk to colleagues and stuff, the market is something that I've never seen and they've never seen as well. And so I think having some patience when it goes into finding a job and or career is probably the most important part. It's taking a long time for folks to find jobs. It also means that we have to be really, really diligent and detailed when we fill out our applications. So again, really reading those job descriptions to see what's needed and making sure it shows up on our resume is super important. There are so many systems out there now. We can't guarantee an actual human is ever going to read our application until a certain point in the process. And sometimes systems, AI, those kinds of things will kick out resumes and applications fairly early on into the process. So technology is a good thing, but it also has created some barriers for folks to get into particular jobs. The other thing too is that, since COVID, it seems to be a lingering thing. You know, um, some businesses are really trying to still understand who they are as an organization. What positions do they need? How much money do they have for particular positions? So sometimes I hear often that clients might be the second or third in line from a hire, but then something might come through where it says, well, we decided to consolidate this position with somebody else that's already in the organization. So the market is interesting. I don't know if and when that's going to change. I think that's where it comes down to not being so focused on a particular job or a particular organization or field somebody wants to go into, but knowing that we might need to really do some research and see what else is out there so that folks can find those jobs.
You touched on a couple of answers to a follow-up question I wanted to ask.
Mm.
You talked about having patience,
Mhm.
filling out applications diligently, and then I think what you just said was just be aware that as companies reorganize or work through this process of understanding who they are, a job that you applied for last week might no longer be available.
Right.
And the question I wanted to ask was for young or early entry level job applicants who
Mhm.
feel like they have the academic skills in place, maybe they've practiced developing some experience and knowledge and those kinds of things. They're applying to jobs, maybe they've applied to 10, 15, they're not really getting any traction. That I would imagine can be really discouraging. They feel like they've done everything right. They might be tempted to give up, or when they're at that stage,
Mhm.
what do you suggest that they do? Do they just stay patient and just keep
Right.
applying? Or is this one of these failures or feedbacks that they need to do something a little bit differently?
Yeah. So, one of it is again just that reminder to be patient, but this is also a time to go back and take a look at our application materials. If we're not getting traction from our resumes and cover letters, maybe it's time for a redo. If I have a client that's been, getting invited for interviews but isn't making it past a certain point, maybe we need to do some more interview coaching and practice. So, again, I think it's a time to really reevaluate and evaluate what's been going on and see where we can make some tweaks along the way. I have a client right now that I'm working with that they're getting all kinds of invitations for interviews, but aren't making it further into the process. So all we've been focusing on is how does that individual show up and perform, really is what it is, during the interview process. And so we've been learning some different techniques, different ways to talk about our experience. So again, I think it varies based on the stage that folks aren't hearing things, but knowing that we can continue to work and modify how we show up in those various situations.
Gosh, I wish I'd met you when I was young, and you would have saved me a lot of time and frustration. This is such good information. You got so detailed with it. I think it's going to take some time to. I'll have to go back through this, and I think our listeners would want to re-listen to this conversation because you've provided so much information. I learned a ton.
Oh, good.
Um, is there anything else that you want to share in this talk? I'd love to have you back on as well. But did
Yeah.
we miss anything?
No, I think the only other thing that I would add, we talked a lot about executive function and workplace. I think the other component that I really focus on with my clients is that social piece. Because everything we do in life is social at some point. So developing those skills around icebreakers and, a lot of my clients come to me and they say, Sarah, I absolutely hate small talk. And I'm like, that's cool, but we need to figure out how do we become a little more comfortable with it because, you know, that's what people do. They stand around in the break room and just kind of chit chat about their weekends or, maybe one of their kids' softball games. And clients will tell me, not only do I hate that, but I just don't care. And I said, sometimes we have to just show an interest so that we develop those relationships at work because you never know when somebody might be ask you to work with them on a project or you have to say, hey Andrew, can you come work with me on this project? So again, I think the social piece is as important as understanding where do I want to go for work and do I have the right executive function skills.
So you're looking at it as not just a personal interest or something that's enjoyable, but actually a technique and a skill. It's a job skill.
It is. It is. It's a job skill. It's a life skill, right? I tell folks all the time, like when you go to the grocery store and you're checking out, and the person's going to say, "How is your day?" And some of my clients will ask me, "Well, what if I'm having a terrible day? Do I tell that to them?" And this is that black and white thinking again, which is, no, you're not going to tell the person at the grocery store you're having a really crappy day, right? But just to say, like, my day is okay. How is yours? Because again, it's transactional. And so it's just how do we be friendly? How do we be cordial? And how do we have the right social skills? Now, if my parent asks me, how was my day? That's a different conversation. But again, every single day we're going to have these interactions. And so understanding what we like and don't like, but then how do we interact with other folks?
You're working on so many skills.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, are there any podcasts or books or any other resources that you can think of or that you generally recommend to maybe
Mm,
it's different for all of your clients, but if they
yeah.
wanted to maybe I should start with this. If they wanted to get in touch with you, how do they find
Mhm.
you?
Yeah. So again, my company name is the Engagement Catalyst LLC. I have a website. They can email me, and that's at scolorosa@hotmail.com. Up on my website's my phone number. Like I said, anybody can reach out. I do offer a free 30-minute consultation to see if what a client is needing is something that I can help support. So it's a way for us to know, can we work together? I always tell clients, hey, I want you to want to work with me, and if it's not a good match, that's fine. We'll go find somebody else for you. So just know I'm always here. I want to answer people's questions and I want them to find the right resources for them.
Sure. And you can consult over the phone and you do a lot of well, we call it telehealth, but
Right.
remote,
Yeah.
virtual.
Yeah. I like you said at the beginning, I see folks all across the country. So again, we use the telehealth or Zoom calls. And that's kind of nice so we can see each other. But I mean, there are some clients who just prefer to us meet on a phone call.
Certainly. Yep. Nope. That's all great. I'll put that information in the show notes so listeners know where to find you. And again, I can't thank you enough for coming on. This
Yeah.
was I had an idea of what we were going to go through, and this just kind of blew me away. And I had so many questions. I had to really work to just keep my mouth shut and let you talk because it was
Yeah.
so good.
Good. I'm glad it was helpful, and like I said, I'm really excited about this community of providers to help, our neurodiverse friends and beyond, really go find out what, makes them tick and how they can be successful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
You're
Sarah
welcome.
Colorosa, the engagement catalyst. We really appreciate it and hope you can come back on soon.
I would love to. Thank you so much.
Thanks. That's it from us today. As always, you can find more information as well as resources on our website, individualmatters.org. We hope you'll join us at the next podcast where we'll continue to explore topics around successful living, learning and education, and child development, and share ways to help you live a more positive and fulfilling life.
The preceding information is not intended to provide or serve as medical, clinical, or educational advice. Individual Matters is not responsible for the accuracy of guest statements. All information should be validated independently. Please consult with your doctor, mental health provider, attorney, or other appropriate professionals before making any personal decisions for yourself or those in your care.